I didn't wake up one day planning to steal from my family. That's the part people don't understand. It didn't start as theft in my mind. It started as something temporary, something small, something I told myself I would fix before anyone noticed. They still don't know. My family trusts me. They always have. I was the responsible one. The one who helped with errands, handled paperwork, kept things organized. If something needed to be paid, tracked, or managed, they gave it to me without question. That trust didn't come from nowhere. I earned it over years of being dependable. That's what makes this story harder to tell. The first time it happened, I was desperate. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, suffocating way. Bills were piling up. I was behind. I felt embarrassed asking for help because I was supposed to be the one who had things together. Everyone thought I was fine. I let them believe that. One afternoon, I noticed cash missing from my own account. Not stolen, just spent faster than I realized. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, calculating numbers that refused to make sense. That's when I remembered the envelope. My family keeps money in simple ways. Emergency cash. Savings for future plans. Money that sits untouched because it's meant for just in case. I knew where it was. I knew no one checked it often. I knew exactly how much was there. I told myself I'd borrow it. Just a small amount. Just enough to get through the month. I planned to put it back as soon as things stabilized. In my head, that made it different. Borrowing isn't stealing if you return it, right? My hands were shaking when I took it. I remember counting the bills twice, then 3 times, like that would change what I was doing. I felt sick and relieved at the same time. The relief scared me more than the guilt. About 10% into this story, let me say this clearly. If you find this story good, please like and subscribe our channel. It's free for you, but helps us a lot to keep sharing real stories like this. That first time, nothing happened. No one noticed. No one asked questions. Life went on like normal. I paid what I needed to pay. I slept better. I told myself I'd put the money back next month. Next month came and went. Something unexpected happened then. Instead of feeling panicked, I felt calm. Too calm. The world didn't end. My family didn't suffer. Nothing changed. That silence made it easier to justify the next step. The second time wasn't planned either. Another bill, another shortfall, another moment where asking for help felt harder than taking what I already knew I could access. I took a little more this time. Still told myself it was temporary. After that, the line blurred. I stopped calling it borrowing. I didn't call it stealing either. I just stopped naming it. It became something I did when I needed to. Something that existed quietly in the background of my life. What made it worse was how normal everything felt. Family dinners, laughing, talking about future plans that the stolen money was technically part of. I would sit there, nodding along, feeling like I was watching myself from the outside. Every time someone mentioned finances, my chest tightened. I listened carefully, waiting for suspicion. It never came. They trusted me completely. That trust became both my shield and my burden. I started keeping mental notes. How much I took, when I took it, how much needed to go back. At first, I tracked everything carefully. I told myself this proved I wasn't a bad person. Bad people don't keep records. Over time, the numbers became fuzzy. Sometimes I would open the envelope just to look, just to reassure myself. Then I'd convince myself it wouldn't matter if I took a little more. After all, I was still planning to fix everything eventually. That future version of me was very confident. The present version was just surviving. There were moments I almost confessed. Late at night, when guilt crept in quietly. When I imagined telling them the truth, explaining how it started, promising to make it right. In my head, the confession always ended with understanding. But reality felt riskier. What if they didn't forgive me? What if trust broke in a way that couldn't be repaired? I told myself staying silent was protecting them. That was another lie, but it felt comforting. I became more careful. I learned when people checked, when they didn't. I learned how to move money in ways that didn't leave obvious gaps. I hated how quickly I adapted to that. The worst part wasn't the fear of being caught. It was how my identity started to shift. I stopped seeing myself as someone who made a mistake. I started seeing myself as someone who had a secret. Secrets change how you act. I laughed louder to hide tension. I avoided certain conversations. I became overly helpful, like good behavior could balance bad actions. Once, someone joked about how lucky we were to have savings just sitting there. I smiled and nodded, feeling my stomach twist. I realized then that the money no longer felt abstract. It had weight. It had consequences I was actively ignoring. I promised myself again that I would stop, that this was the last time, that I'd figure out another way. I meant it when I said it. I always did. But meaning something doesn't make it happen. By the end of this phase, I wasn't stealing because I was desperate anymore. I was stealing because it had become easier than facing the truth. Easier than admitting I needed help. Easier than dealing with the damage honestly. They still don't know. And at this point, the scariest question isn't whether they'll find out. It's whether I even know how to stop. After a while, the fear didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It stopped being loud and sharp and became quiet and constant, like a low hum I carried with me everywhere. I woke up with it. I went to sleep with it. And somehow, I still kept going. The amounts I took slowly grew. Not because I planned it that way, but because life kept finding new ways to pressure me. Something always came up. An unexpected expense. A delay in income. A problem I didn't want to explain. Each time I told myself it was temporary. Each time the line moved a little farther away. I noticed how careful I had become. I checked schedules. I memorized routines. I knew when no one would look, when questions were unlikely, when conversations about money would happen. I hated how natural this felt. It scared me how quickly it became part of my thinking. What made it worse was how useful the money felt. It solved problems instantly. No awkward conversations, no admitting failure, no asking for help, just relief. That relief was addictive in a quiet way. Not exciting, but comforting. I started to justify things differently. I told myself I contributed in other ways. I helped around the house. I handled responsibilities others avoided. I convinced myself I deserved some flexibility. I never said that thought out loud, but it lived in my head. Family gatherings became harder. I listened closely when money came up. If someone mentioned budgets, plans, or savings, my heart rate spiked. I watched faces carefully, searching for signs of doubt. There were none. The trust remained solid. That trust made me reckless. One afternoon I took more than usual. I remember hesitating, staring at the amount, telling myself it was too much. Then I reminded myself I'd pay it back in chunks. I folded the bills carefully, like being neat made it better. Later that week, someone casually mentioned that something felt slightly off with the numbers. They didn't accuse me. They weren't even worried. It was said lightly, almost as a joke. But my chest tightened so hard I had to excuse myself from the room. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at the mirror. I looked normal, calm, responsible. No one could see what I was carrying. That scared me more than being suspected would have. I thought about stopping. Really stopping. I told myself I'd figure something out. Sell something. Work extra. Admit I was struggling. The ideas felt heavy and humiliating. Taking the money felt easier. That's when I realized I wasn't just avoiding consequences. I was avoiding vulnerability. I didn't want my family to see me fail. I didn't want to break the image they had of me. Stealing felt less painful than disappointing them. That logic didn't make sense, but it felt real in the moment. The lies became more layered. Not spoken lies, but behavioral ones. I changed topics quickly. I volunteered for tasks that kept me close to the money. I offered help before anyone asked. I stayed involved so no one else would need to look too closely. I became part of the system I was exploiting. There were nights I lay awake replaying everything. I calculated how long it would take to replace what I'd taken. I imagined being caught. I imagined the shock, the silence, the questions. I told myself I would confess if it reached a certain point. Then that point passed. The fear of being exposed never fully went away, but it stopped controlling my decisions. I started believing I could manage this indefinitely, that I understood the risks, that nothing had gone wrong so far, so maybe nothing ever would. That belief made me careless in small ways. I stopped counting as precisely. I trusted my memory. I assumed I'd remember. That assumption would come back to haunt me. One evening, someone asked me to help review some finances together. A simple request. Normal. Logical. I smiled and agreed, feeling my throat tighten. As we sat down, I realized I hadn't prepared. I didn't know the exact numbers anymore. My hands felt cold. I tried to stay calm, answering questions slowly, redirecting when needed. I laughed at the right moments. I acted like everything was fine. Inside, my thoughts were racing. We didn't finish reviewing everything that night. Something else came up. We postponed it. I went to bed feeling sick, knowing how close that had been. That should have scared me straight. Instead, it pushed me deeper. I told myself I just needed time to clean things up, to fix the numbers, to replace what I could. I started planning how to do that without anyone noticing. I was no longer just reacting. I was actively maintaining the lie. At some point, I realized the money wasn't the biggest problem anymore. The biggest problem was that I had crossed a line where honesty felt more dangerous than theft, where telling the truth felt like destruction, and lying felt like survival. They still didn't know, but now, it felt like the secret was growing faster than I could control, and I could sense something shifting. The safety I thought I had was starting to crack. By this point, the secret had a presence. It wasn't just something I did anymore. It followed me. It sat with me during conversations. It showed up in quiet moments when nothing else was happening. I could feel it even when no one was talking about money. The review we postponed came back up sooner than I expected. Someone suggested we finally go through everything properly, just to clean things up. They said it casually, like it was no big deal. Everyone agreed. I nodded too, smiling, pretending I felt relief instead of panic. That night I didn't sleep. I went over the numbers again and again in my head. I tried to remember exact amounts. I tried to reconstruct timelines. The more I thought about it, the more unsure I became. I realized how much I had relied on memory instead of records, how confident I had been that I could keep track without proof. I couldn't. The next day, I opened the envelope alone. I counted the money slowly, carefully, hoping I was wrong, hoping it would somehow add up. It didn't. The gap was bigger than I expected, bigger than I was ready for. My chest felt tight. My hands went numb. For the first time, I truly understood that I couldn't fix this quietly anymore. I didn't have the money to replace what was missing. Not quickly. Not secretly. I started looking for ways out that didn't exist. I considered moving money around. I considered delaying the review again. I even considered confessing partially, leaving out details, softening the truth. Every option felt like another lie stacked on top of the first. Family conversations became unbearable. Every normal interaction felt loaded. When someone joked, I laughed too loud. When someone asked how I was doing, I answered too fast. I was afraid that if I paused, the truth would come out on its own. One afternoon, someone noticed I seemed tense. They asked if something was wrong. I said I was tired. They nodded and moved on. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. Not because they suspected me, but because they cared. That care made everything heavier. The day of the review arrived quietly. No drama, no build-up. Just a normal day with an ordinary task that felt like a countdown in my head. We sat together with papers spread out, numbers remembered out loud, questions asked calmly. I answered what I could. I avoided what I couldn't. At one point, someone paused and frowned slightly. Not an accusation, just confusion. They said a number didn't match what they remembered. The room went quiet for a second too long. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. I explained it away. I blamed timing. I blamed memory. I blamed small expenses that added up. I spoke slowly, confidently, using the same calm tone I always used. I watched their faces as I talked, searching for doubt. They accepted it. But something changed. Not suspicion. Awareness. After that day, people paid a little more attention. Not enough to panic, but enough to notice patterns. Conversations about money became more frequent. Checks became more regular. The space I had relied on began to shrink. I felt trapped in a corner I built myself. The stress started affecting my body. I lost my appetite. My sleep got worse. I jumped at small noises. I replayed conversations in my head, analyzing every word. I hated what I was becoming. I promised myself again that I would stop, that no matter what happened next, I wouldn't take anything else. I kept that promise. But stopping didn't fix the past. It just made the consequences feel closer. I tried to think of ways to repay the money honestly. I considered taking on extra work, selling things, making sacrifices quietly. But every solution took time I didn't have. The worst part was realizing how easily everything could collapse. One honest mistake, one careful question, one moment of courage from someone else. That's all it would take. I started imagining the conversation that would eventually happen. I pictured myself sitting there, explaining how it started small, how I never meant for it to grow, how ashamed I was. In those imagined conversations, I was forgiven. Reality was quieter and scarier. One evening, someone mentioned future plans that depended on the savings. Something important, something meaningful. I nodded, my throat tight, knowing I had already altered that future without their consent. That was the moment I felt something crack inside me. I realized the damage wasn't just financial. It was emotional. It was trust. It was the foundation of how my family saw me, and no matter how this ended, that foundation would never be the same. I had crossed a point where silence was no longer neutral. It was actively causing harm. They still didn't know, but I could feel the truth getting closer, like a storm you can sense before you see. And I knew the next step would decide everything. Either I would finally speak, or the secret would choose the moment for me. The day finally came when the secret felt too heavy to carry. I had been living with it quietly for months, maybe years, convincing myself I could control it, that I could manage it without anyone noticing. But control was an illusion. I knew that now. It started like any other day. The family was gathered for a routine meeting about bills and plans. I sat there, pretending to listen, nodding along, smiling when needed. Inside, I was screaming. My mind raced, counting what I had taken, how much I owed, how easy it would be to slip up. And then a casual comment tipped everything over. Someone mentioned a missing amount. Not an accusation, not even in concern, just an observation. A number that didn't match their memory. The room went quiet for a second. My chest tightened. I could feel the sweat on my palms. I wanted to disappear. I forced a smile. I explained it away with dates, minor expenses, small mistakes in calculation. I spoke carefully, slowly, each word a shield. They accepted it, just like they always did. But I knew the acceptance was fragile. One slip, one forgotten detail, and everything could collapse. I felt like a tightrope walker without a safety net. Every step had to be perfect, every word measured. My stomach ached, my head throbbed, and the fear that had been simmering all this time boiled over. Later that night, alone in my room, I stared at the money I had hidden. The numbers no longer seemed manageable. I realized that even if I stopped now, the past actions had consequences that couldn't be erased. I had crossed lines that would take years, maybe a lifetime to reconcile. I thought about confessing. The idea terrified me and tempted me at the same time. Saying the words aloud meant releasing a weight I had carried for so long. But it also meant facing judgment, disappointment, and the possibility of being rejected by the people I loved most. I couldn't do it yet. Not today. Not now. I told myself I'd figure out a way, a method to repair the damage quietly, a way that allowed me to keep their trust, at least for now. I would replace what I took slowly, carefully, secretly. It felt like a plan, a fragile, fragile plan. The next few weeks were excruciating. Every interaction carried tension. Every conversation about money made my heart race. I became hyper-aware of who checked the envelopes, who was counting, who remembered what. I even started leaving small notes for myself, reminders to move funds, to adjust balances, to act normal. My life became a series of calculated moves in a game I had never meant to play. And yet, despite all the fear, the hiding, the stress, there was also a strange thrill. The thrill wasn't from the act itself, not really. It was from the secrecy, the knowledge that I was walking through life with a dangerous truth that no one suspected. That knowledge, as unhealthy as it was, made me feel alive in ways I hadn't before. Eventually, I realized something important. This story wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about survival or financial problems. It was about who I had become while hiding it. The person who could lie effortlessly, manipulate circumstances, and live with the burden of deception. That person was me, and I didn't recognize her. I also realized something darker. The longer I stayed silent, the harder it would be to ever confess. Each day added another layer, another invisible thread holding the secret together. Breaking it now could unravel everything, but staying silent could unravel everything too. I was trapped in my own making. At some point, I stopped asking myself whether they would find out. That question no longer mattered. The real question was whether I would ever have the courage to face the truth. Whether I would ever accept the consequences of my actions, no matter how terrifying. And whether I could forgive myself for betraying the people I loved the most. I have no illusions about what this story will do. Some may judge me harshly. Others may understand the fear and desperation that leads someone down a path they never planned. But I tell it anyway, because secrets don't protect you forever. They live inside you. They shape you. And eventually, they demand to be faced. I still carry the guilt. I still carry the shame. But I also carry the knowledge that the truth, when it comes, will either break me or set me free. And maybe, just maybe, I can start to repair the bridges I burned quietly, one careful step at a time. If you find this story good, please like and subscribe our channel. It's free for you, but helps us a lot to keep sharing real stories like this.